When do you think, when you go back and start thinking about 10 years ago, when do you think before 2008, because I think for you it might have happened in 2006 or 7, that you started thinking there was a problem?
Yeah. It was probably, I have to go check my memory, but probably the summer of '07, there was a whole list of issues that had been building up. Syndicated leverage lending, which is literally 5 to 10 times what it is today, was a problem. The quant funds were over leveraged. The investment banks were leveraged 30 to 40 to 1, which is far more than it was before. So you already had this teetering thing which is very nerve-wracking, and some people were taking action to fix that, and some weren't.
You were.
You're damn straight. We were raising capital and liquidity and trying to be prepared for what I thought could be a very difficult time.
Okay, so fast forward to Bear Stearns. Because to me, Bear Stearns was a crucial turning point in a national conversation about bailouts and rescues and the role of the government and the idea of a public-private partnership.
Right.
And also the idea of moral hazard.
Right.
What did you think the weekend of Bear Stearns about those issues?
Yeah. So first, we bought Bear Stearns, and it wasn't bailed out by the government. The government did a little bit of financing, because they act like they're financed by the guys. Not. We did the whole thing. They took virtually no risk the way it was structured for them. It just reduced the balance sheet we were taking on, and we thought we were helping the system. We only did it because we were asked to by Hank Paulson, and we thought if it went down, that could be a huge crisis for the globe.
Was it clear to you in the aftermath of Bear that Lehman Brothers was next?
Yeah. Lehman was next in the queue. Everyone knew that. Remember, there were a lot of other things that were having problems. IndyMac, Countrywide, WAMU, Prime. By then, a lot of things was going through. So Bear was in March of '08. 6 months later was Lehman. But I thought that Lehman had time to fix their problems. So my view is that given time, given this notice, you can raise capital, reduce your leverage, do a bunch of stuff. So I was kind of a little surprised in June or July of that year when they made an announcement of big losses, they hadn't taken action, and they scared the marketplace. And so we knew Lehman was next in the line. I was thinking that they would be able to fix it.
Fast forward to early September. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have now been put into conservatorship. The Koreans, I don't know if you remember, were around the hoop on Lehman Brothers. They're out. Yeah. And we're now walking into this weekend. Yeah. It's Thursday, and for the second time in 2 weeks, you tell Lehman that you have to get some more collateral. Yeah. Why did you make that call? What happened?
Yeah. Again, people blow it way out of proportion. We were the largest counterparty. They had tons of extra collateral. So we were taking on Lehman risk. So our conversation with Lehman was more about, hey, we're going to try to help you guys out, but to the extent you can give us more collateral, give us more collateral. And they were always fine. And remember, everyone around the world was asking for more haircuts. So everyone was demanding higher collateral for exactly the same trade, sucking liquidity out of the system. And we were doing that a little bit too, but very respectfully, so we wouldn't hurt Lehman. But now you had this succession, Fannie Mae, Lehman. We bought WAMU like a week after Lehman. So a lot of things were happening at that point that were beyond anything that we've all ever seen.
Just to the point, though, on the collateral, because there are Lehman people who say JPMorgan, they took they were asking for too much money at a time when we were.
They're ignorant. People were asking for more collateral everywhere. The day after they went bankrupt, we financed Lehman almost, I think the number is $70 to $80 billion. JPMorgan, not the federal government, and we needed collateral against the $70 billion. So we were taking collateral because our exposure was like this, and other peers were like this. But we were doing it to help facilitate them. We could have closed them all off, like most people did.
So you get a call on Friday.
Yeah.
It's pouring rain outside.
Yeah.
To get down to the Fed.
Yeah.
What are you thinking when you get that call?
I knew what it's about. I mean, Hank called me up and said, you got to come down. I said, I can't. I'm having dinner with my soon-to-be, my son-in-law's parents for the first time. And he said, you have to come down. I said, I'm not coming, Hank, because you got to go. Downtown's a long trip. I said, you got to come. Everyone's going to be there. It's critical. I said, okay, I'll go.
And what was the scene like in the room? Do you remember?
Yeah, I'm going to say there was 17 banks there. So it was all the big banks, a couple of big foreign banks. I think Ben Bernanke was on the phone, and Chris Cox was on the phone, and Hank was there. I'm pretty sure Guyton was there. They basically, people are pretty mature. People are trying to help out. So they said, what can you guys do to fix it? Like we did, remember, for LTCM.
Right.
And we actually worked in a facility that might fix it. that somehow could take on some of these assets, give them long-term financing, and reduce the burden on Lehman and or anyone else who maybe needed the help. They said, second is, are you all prepared for a failure? And the third, they said they're looking for a buyer. I thought it was a day late and a dollar short, that there's no way they're going to find a buyer, and that Lehman was going to go down. And it was going to go down hard, a disorderly collapse, because regulators had no legal authority to take it over like they did Oamu. And so when I left, I said, it's goodbye, Lehman.
Before you break for the night, Paulson tells you and some of the other CEOs that there's going to be consequences if you don't help. Do you remember what he said exactly?
TARP.
Not TARP. This is Lehman Brothers. This is him sort of laying down the gauntlet. This idea that if you don't help, it will be remembered.
I think he said something like that, but I think he also meant that if you help yourselves, it's not going to have all this huge negative political ramification. And he was right about that. It wasn't a threat. It was like, hey guys, we got to do it for yourselves. And if you can't, there will be a price to pay. And he was absolutely dead right about that.
The next morning, you wake up and you do a conference call.
No, it was that night.
It was that night.
I think I was driving home. I called up my whole operating committee. I told them we're about to have a catastrophe take place. All hands on deck the next day. So I think on Saturday, everyone was at work. We had workforces and teams going through every single part of our exposures, every single part of which we've been through before. And I think I called my board that Saturday,
right,
and said, we have a national emergency. And I talked to them what it was. I tried to explain it to them, how bad it can get and how we're going to try to handle all that.
And when you told them how bad it could get, what did you tell them? What did you think?
I said you're going to see the worst week ever in American financial history since the Great Depression, that in my opinion, Lehman's going to go bankrupt, that AIG is a possibility, and that it might be a domino effect after that, and that we just don't know how bad it's going to get.
What do you think the incentive was for everybody around the hoop to value the assets? The reason I make the mention is just this idea that a lot of people, to some extent, I would imagine, would have wanted to buy these assets for either as little as humanly possible, or they'd be better off without a competitor.
There may be some people who are rapacious and would love to see Lehman go bankrupt, like Bear, because Bear didn't help out much in LTCM. I think most of the people there is more like, they're your friends. If I'm playing tennis, I want to beat you, but if you're having a heart attack, we stop the game and we get you to the hospital. So I think most of the people that are trying to legitimately do what we asked to do by Hank Paulson, where they all were, I don't know, and I don't really personally care.
That Sunday morning, you come back to the table. And I'm told that you were the ringleader at that point in terms of everybody going around the table and saying, who would put up $1 billion to try to help finance this ring? Tell us about that.
Well, I don't know if I was a ringleader, but the idea was that obviously this is going to be a disaster, that it's huge risk for everybody in the room. And the idea was, could we put up, I've got it, $20 billion between us, would you put up some money in everyone so that we have equity that can borrow more money that can basically finance their bad assets, okay? And then basically recapitalize Lehman effectively. And it was a good effort. Like I said, if we had another week or two, we might have been able to pull something like that off. And it was just a day late, $1 short.
Was your first instinct that morning that everything that could have been done was, or did you think we should have still found some other way to do this?
I have a disagreement with I don't really agree with what other people say. Whether Lehman had been bailed out or not, the crisis was going to unfold. The leverage was there, the repo was there, there's a lot of losses in mortgages, money was sloshing around the world, government started to guarantee deposits, which actually made it hard for banks. So it was going to unfold anyway, whether they went bankrupt or whether they were bailed out. And whether they went bankrupt or bailed out, as people realized the severity of this problem, which we just told you, a bailout would have told you the same thing. There's something deeply amiss in the system. You still would have had a very bad market afterwards. It just would have unfolded slightly differently.
So you don't think that exacerbated the crisis?
It might have, but it would have happened anyway.
Fast forward 2 weeks after that, so they become bank holding companies. Do you remember getting the call to get to DC for TARP?
Yes.
Do you remember where you were?
Yeah, what month was that again?
That was early October.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was taken off the first weekend that I'd taken off in almost 6 months. And I was at my house in Bedford, and Hank calls me again, you got to come to Washington. I said, Hank, I'm not coming. He said, Jamie, you gotta come, this is critical, and your brethren's gonna be there. So I said, okay. So I got my suit on, I got in an airplane, I flew down to Washington, I walked into, I think they call it the cash room. And Hank was there, Geithner was there, Sheila Bair was there, Ben Bernanke was there, and they obviously had a plan.
What did you think when they told you that you had to take $25 billion?
I thought that they had a lot of time to think about it, and we didn't. That they wanted a plan to try to save the American financial system, that I would consider it, that I would definitely have to talk to my board about it. So I spoke to my board, and I told them this is asymmetrically not good for JPMorgan, but it goes back to my example about someone having a heart attack. But it's good for America. They're asking us to do it. It was at the request of the Secretary of Treasury with the full understanding of the President of the United States. TARP had been voted, and that if we should do what we can to help. And
you said yes.
And I said yes.
When you look back now, 10 years later, what's the great lesson of this whole period?
I would not have done Bear Stearns. I don't particularly trust the government like I might have back then. It was used as a political weapon afterwards. So after TARP, the banks were toast. In hindsight, the better thing to do was provide a lot of liquidity to the system. Remember what the Fed provided through all their alphabet plans, TPIP and TPAP and PPIP and all that stuff. They were financing America, and so the banks continued to make loans. The market didn't. The Fed financed it.
When you look at today's political environment here in the United States globally, oftentimes people connect the financial crisis to sort of the modern day sense of populism. Do you think that connection's real?
A little bit, yeah. I think the American public, there was a huge problem. And the American public blames the elite, the people in charge, whether it's politicians, CEOs, Congress, et cetera. And they're right. In general, that's who you should blame, the people who are in charge.
After everything happened in October, you sent Hank Paulson a quote. It's actually the last line in Too Big to Fail,
right,
as well, from Theodore Roosevelt, that reads in part, "It's not the critic who counts." You know the quote.
I know the quote, yeah.
What
it's not the critic who counts, but the man in the arena. Bloodied and...
Do you remember it? Say it.
Well, it's not the critic who counts, but it's like the man in the arena, bloodied and bowed and fighting for a good cause. And look, Hank was being criticized left and right, as were Ben and Tim and stuff like that. But I thought they were in the arena. They were trying to fix a terrible problem. And like I said, it's very easy to criticize people. I think if you're in the arena and you're trying to solve a terrible problem, I'm going to try to help you. And I don't just want to be the critic telling you every little mistake I think you might have made or done differently. So I give him full credit for that, and all of them. And including President Bush, who stood behind Hank, and for a while, President Obama, who stood behind the idea. I think after that, they politicized the whole thing, but at that point in time, they're all doing the right stuff.
But the public perception turned. And so the lesson for CEOs in terms of dealing with the government in the future, you think is going to be what?
I wouldn't take their word. There is no word. The next government can do whatever they want. I don't know if the American public knows that. You can agree with whatever you want this government, the next one can change their minds.
Do you think there's another financial crisis that you can foresee?
No, I think people say that, but the leverage is nothing like it was before. The off-balance sheet vehicles aren't there. There's shadow banking, but it's still containable. Repo's properly done. There's very much less unsecured credit, unsecured short-term borrowing. Capital's higher, liquidity's higher. Regulators have more authority. The whole thing is different. Lehman wouldn't happen today.